And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Hey, Bonnie. Hi, Karen. Welcome. Bonnie, it looks like somebody else is there with you. So whoever that is, welcome and hello. There's some Mussar groups or some mindfulness groups that get together, and every week they start with a little something different, reading or a poem that's kind of related to the topic. And I, as you've probably noticed, have a different strategy where I always start exactly the same way. And for me, that was part of just a deliberate decision as an order practice, that we will all kind of do the same thing every time to kind of drop into the special space, the sacred space together. There's really no right or wrong way to do these things, but just for transparency, it was a deliberate order practice that I chose to do for these groups, and actually all Mussar groups that I run, whether it's in person or if you were, can't say every group I've ever done, but it's been since pretty early on. This is the way I roll. So for today, as we kind of explore order, I wanted to share again this quote that I wrote about in this week's email. First, a person should put their home together, then their town, and then the world. And some of you actually wrote to me with kind of your thoughts, but I was, as you may have gathered, was quite taken with this idea. And I thought it could be fruitful for us to kind of maybe dig in a little bit deeper as our opening discussion. So I would love to hear, you sort of heard how I approached it, but how might you approach or relate to this or not relate to it? I would love to hear. Yes, Bonnie.
Well, I'd be glad to start. So I've come out of 11 years of a 12-step program, and much of what I've learned in the 12-step program is absolutely what you were writing about. I really liked that, what you wrote. The quote made a lot of sense to me, which is basically, if you don't take care of yourself first, you're not going to be able to take care of other people. Or put your mask on, which they say on the plane all the time. Put get your oxygen mask on first so that you can help the other person. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, for me, it's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. And order made a very big impression on me because I am the person that really works very hard to put everything away where it belongs. I drove my kids nuts. They're adults. They can drive their kids nuts if they wish to. But I know that for me, I have to put things away before I can go on to something else. Otherwise, I'm in trouble. So that just spoke to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Christo.
I've always been, this desk that I'm at is usually the worst. I would have so much on the desk, but I always knew exactly where every single thing was. The only problem is it took me longer than normal to get the object that I needed or wanted. And I finally decided to open up all the drawers on my desk, and the drawers were mostly less than half full. So it's like I was using the top of the desk more than the drawers. But I always knew exactly where every single thing was. It just took too long to get to.
Yeah.
Which ended up wasting so much time that if you waste a moment of time, you can never get that moment back. So that was a big motivation for me to get to where I can see the top of my desk now. Finally.
Thank you, Krista. Hey, Phyllis, welcome. I just put what we're discussing, a quote from Israel Salanter in the chat, which is what I wrote about this week as well. So next we have Sue. So Sue,
I wanted to echo what Bonnie had said about the, putting the mask on first. That's what I was thinking about too, when you talked about the quote, and the idea is basically just to take it a little, thinking more about it, about making sure we're centered first. And I think of it too in terms of God and our community. I think of, being centered, then going up to God and going out to the world or going out to the community. And I need to be centered first before I do that.
Mhm.
So it's kind of how I think of other three, also thinking about, being like loving myself, loving God, loving the community in that kind of a way. And I think it's important to get our own stuff together first before we go out there. I think a lot of times we think about just going and helping and just being centered. If we just rush out there, the idea is and not be centered ourselves in our own home, which was basically what the quote is saying. Be okay with your own environment first before you go out in the world. So I really think that's a wonderful quote.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you for sharing your, I really like that interpretation. Thank you. Carrie.
I wrote this to Greg. I responded to the home as the physical home. I agree that you have to take care of yourself first before you can do anything else. But we have, when we moved here, we decided that we wanted to. We're very climate conscious. We're very eco-conscious, and we want to do our part. So we put in solar panels for electricity. We put in a solar hot water heater. We redid our well to make it efficient. And now we're hoping to put in a geothermal heat pump at some point so that we can practice what we preach. And I also realized that the home, me and the physical home, are never going to be done. There's always something to put in order. So that's not going to stop me from going out and being a part of society and doing, being very active in politics and so forth and so on, because the order is always an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Karen.
Oh, was that me, Karen?
That is you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this time that we're talking about order, I took a different approach. It struck me as I'd been working on ordering the physical, that order also applies to the emotional. And for me, when my emotions are in order, it is easier for me to get other things done.
Mhm.
For some people, it may be reciprocal. And chesed has always been, I've always associated myself more with chesed. And so I'm reminded sometimes by my children that if chesed is so important to me, outside the house, it needs to be just as, if not more important, inside the house in all interactions. So along with Savlanut and others, I am spending more time recognizing and working on ordering my emotions at home so that I'm better able to order the physicals of my life and see how that dominoes outward.
Thank you, Karen. Wonderful. Joanne.
Yeah, Greg, I wrote to you a little bit about this. My way of, I guess, ordering my home. Part of it also is also linked to the community. Okay, so, and I also agree totally with what Karen said and what Carrie said. I mean, it's like you never finish at home because things get messed up again, and they have to be put away and cleaned again, whatever, ordered, filed, there's more filing. you know, and so one of the things I've worked on is I have a big paper bag, I get the mail, I go through it, and everything that I possibly can, I put into the recycle paper bin. And I recycle containers unless I think I can reuse them. And I have my compost, which home composting, which actually reduces my trash bag usage. And also I bring that to the organic garden, and that becomes their compost. And part of the organic gardens plan is they grow organic vegetables and herbs and things for the community food bank. So people can get fresh greens and other vegetables and flowers and herbs. And so it's linked to the community, and I like that very much. And I agree that I'm not going to stop doing the community things, but I'm trying to do charity begins at home also, and be as kind to myself as I can and not overwhelm myself feeling I have to give to this organization, that organization, this thing and that thing, and keep it more in line with my actual income, which is a very good goal that I need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you for sharing. I don't know whether it is Frank or Linda who is
I wonder how
Okay.
other people figure this one out. So how long should you spend on each of those before moving on to the other one? Can you do them concurrently? Should you have a project at home and then move out to? I've always been confused with how you do it, because I can get really lost in one area and then not know where to go next.
a great question, very rabbinic. In the Talmud, they would have spent, pages and pages and pages arguing about how long to spend on each. So what do people think? How do you decide? Anyone have any thoughts? Yeah.
Hello, Greg.
Yes. Hey, Martin.
This is Martin. Hi, Greg. Let's see. My question is, how can anyone be helpful to another person or cause if one is not centered in ourselves? Okay. Is that even possible? Okay.
Well, I think my thought on that is that we all start from where we are. So if we're not centered, it doesn't mean that we can't be helpful. But if we're out of balance for something, we're going to bring that to whatever we're doing. So if someone has an anger imbalance, they might bring anger to their tzedakah work, to their charity work.
Yeah.
And it may not be all that it, could be on some level. But it's better to do something, even if we're out of balance, than to wait till we're finally have it all together, which will be never. Because, like what Carrie said around the the order in the house is never done. The order in the soul is never done either. These are long-term projects, investments.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So yeah, certainly the more balanced we are, then probably an improved level of helpfulness then. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. So I see Paul, and then I see Frank or Linda again.
Yeah, so I mean, there are some probably mechanistic ways of thinking about this that, grounding myself through being mindful, mindfully meditating once a day, and then, reaching out to the community, to my town, once a week or something like that. You can sort of put yourself on a path to see what, but, it's always going to be very organic. I think certainly is for me, finding out, how do I engage with my world? How grounded am I feeling? If I'm not feeling grounded, I don't feel very confident about engaging, even with Carrie, sometimes. So, or my family, so it really kind of depends, but certainly starting someplace is good. And I know for me, I've always had to push against my desire for being, having a perfectly articulated plan of action before I do anything. Because by the time I put that together, whatever I was planning to do was it's gone. It's in the past. Like I've lost the opportunity because I tried to make it so perfect.
Yeah.
So through 12-step programs, for me anyway, I really focus on progress and not perfection. So I'll make a mistake. I just plan on, I'm going to make a mistake. That's going to happen. So what do? Well, I can learn from it and I can make progress. And I don't know if that helps Janet or not, but I mean, that's kind of not holding myself to such a high standard that I can't move. That is important for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So Frank or Linda.
This reminds me a little bit about that to be more aware of ourselves. So this is a teaching, and like all teachings, is we strive for it. And it's a long time, I mean, a lifetime pursuit. So I know that, for a long time, actually, because that's my nature, I noticed that I'm totally overwhelmed.
Mm.
And that's kind of you don't want to wait till then, but that tells me I have to kind of draw back and say, no, I cannot do this. And the idea is that what's happening is that we're not taking care of ourselves. It's taking care of ourselves, making sure that we have those habits of self-care, that we have the strength to do those other things.
Thank you, Frank. It also strikes me that the teaching says first do your home, then your community, then this. And the mantra is first things first and last things, as Joanne reminded us, Carol used to say never. So, if we don't start by focusing on, and often I think our sages or our tradition teaches the lesson that we need to learn. So maybe it's hardest to focus on the home, or it's hardest to focus on the self-care, which is why we're given that reminder to do that first. But if we do 100% self-care, then, as Hillel would say, if I'm only for myself, then what am I? So I don't know, probably in the Talmud somewhere they say you should spend 2/3 of your time, unless it's Shabbat, and then you do, 3/4 of your time. But I like the Mussar approach better, which is more directional. But some people like to have the answer. Bonnie, what's your thought?
Well, I had this fabulous experience of working with a wonderful rabbi named Sid Swartz, who set up the Panim program that I taught in for a number of years. And his materials are very available and very readable. And he talks about concentric circles. And that's taking what you have and putting it in, and you are in the center, your family's around you, your community is outside of that circle, and the larger world. And you move in and out. And so I think the question of how much do you spend in it till you're comfortable, and then you move back and forth. It's also the same way in fundraising. It's for me, I don't ask for a gift unless I've made my own.
Hmm.
And then from there, I can go out. So it still is that concentric circle and you're in the center. And I don't think that makes you egotistic. I think it makes you centered.
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie. That reminds me of a friend of mine, like when I was started to teach Mussar, she thought this was like the greatest thing. And she was going around to various Jewish day schools telling them that they should be teaching Mussar to the kids, but she'd never come to any of my classes. And so I said, do you practice Mussar? She said, no. And I was like, well, I appreciate your championship, but if you're not practicing it yourself, I'm not sure that's the best thing for you to champion. And it's a similar thing, because it's a lot also about alignment with the inner and the outer world, which I think is another aspect of order, which is kind of implicit in what a lot of what I'm hearing from you. Okay, let's go another level here before we get to the breakout groups. I like this one, and not only because it's from my Torah portion. May I have a volunteer to read this excerpt from Rabbi Nicole Auerbach? Anyone we haven't heard from today on a big enough screen to read?
Rather than meet every transgression with permanent exile, God commands that Israelites who have strayed offer a sacrifice to make amends and to mark their intention to reorder their behavior. God gives them a detailed roadmap for repentance, down to what to do with the fat that covers the kidneys of the animal to be sacrificed. Rabbi Nicole Auerbach, the Mussar Torah commentary, commenting on something.
Tzav, yes.
Tzav.
So I would just like to say, as a 13-year-old, having to wrestle with this parsha, this Torah portion, which is one of the deepest on the sacrifices and the this and the that, I had no idea what was going on. It was really tough. And unfortunately, in those days, or at least my rabbi, they wouldn't like sit down and explain anything to you. I went into the rabbi's office with my little speech, and I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about this. He'd say, that's really fine, Greg. And that was it. So I'm so glad that many, kids today are getting a lot of personal attention from rabbi and clergy and other people to really understand what's going on. So I was taken by this idea that all these details about the kidney, this and the that, she's interpreting as kind of a roadmap for how to kind of do repentance. And obviously, we no longer practice the old Israelite religion of making sacrifices, but I'm wondering, is it useful ever to kind of create a roadmap for kind of repentance, or for doing things differently? What do people think? Have you encountered this in your own experience? Yeah, Sue.
I think Judaism gives us roadmaps. Like, for example, when you offend someone, you're supposed to apologize 3 times. And then if at the 3rd time, if they don't accept it, that's it. I mean, you try. To me, that's kind of a way, we have a lot of, I don't know if you call that a ritual, whatever that is. That's a practice to reorder, like if you're, that would be, I guess, on the emotional level, if you upset somebody and you want to say you're sorry, there it is. You have these 3 times, and if they don't accept it, well, you try. But I mean, that comes from our tradition, which I love, that we have ways to give us that roadmap.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've come a long way since which side of the kidneys to put on the fire up. There's lots of other roadmaps which are maybe a little more relevant to us today. So that's interesting. Joanne.
Yeah, I mean, I really am glad we're not doing animal sacrifice personally. I discussed this with my rabbi. It's like, I hope the Messiah is vegan, but we have, for all the time, and especially in Elul and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, to ways to make amends to our fellow human beings and ways to make amends to Hashem. But now it's prayer instead of physical animal sacrifice. Thank God. And I didn't mean that. Thank God.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Has anyone ever, when you've just like had a difficult conversation coming up, ever kind of jotted down a little plan or thought about what you're going to say ahead of time, and what is that helpful? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. All right, well, let's get ready for our breakouts. We're going to follow up on what we did last week, where for those of you who are here, what we did is we looked at, let's see, we looked at the actions that to sort of inspire us. These are always at the end of the slide deck, but I usually don't get to them. But it was thinking about using these to inspire you to kind of pick one thing to do. And I will put this up in the chat, but we have another quote from Rabbi Nicole Auerbach, which is, in our everyday lives, we often employ the midah of Seder, the soul trait of order, with its rules and rituals to focus on behaviors we want to cultivate. So either if you were here and last week and you thought about a practice, maybe, and you tried it, maybe share what you tried and what you were working on. And if you didn't get to it, or if you weren't here last week, you could think about maybe other rituals or rules for cultivating change, or maybe think about an order practice. So I'm going to put a couple of things in the chat here. Okay, there are the actions. And here is kind of the prompt. Now let me open breakout rooms. Okay, the rooms are open. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So would anyone care to share their experience, either of a practice they tried last week or a practice that they would like to kind of adopt, or maybe a ritual that is helpful to them? Yeah, Shelley.
So it's funny. actually just about 3 days ago, I started going through my emails going, oh my goodness, like all these emails are driving me crazy. I don't even want them. So I don't know how many hours I spent going through each one, unsubscribe, unsubscribe. And I'm like, how did I even get onto some of these? So it's funny, I started making that in order. And I think a lot of times when we realize that our places or our self is in chaos, there's that fear because what's the unknown, right? And I think we're so programmed to automatically think of the worst case scenario that it kind of keeps us from not moving forward. And so I always, whenever I have a negative thought, I always go, thanks universe, but we're not doing that, cancel that one out. And so I was very grateful for your quote on your email, because it did make me realize that, yeah, you've been pushing some things underneath the rug, and it's time to get that rug and get all the dust bunnies out. So thank you very much for that kicking my butt.
You're very welcome. Sue.
So I was saying in the breakout room that I knew that you had this assignment, and so I am very much, I knew I was going to log on, so I am like deadline oriented and wanting to do what the teacher says. So I did it. So just today, and my little goal was to take, as I was sitting here on my computer, my desk last week was a complete mess and it was really bothering me. And I had these little papers everywhere. So I said, okay, I'm going to set 20 minutes, or actually I think I set 30 minutes to clean things up. And I did it today. So that was great. And I actually went on longer than the 30 minutes because it felt so good to clean everything up. So that was kind of a real success. The other thing I mentioned, though, was that when I was cleaning the papers, I did throw a lot out, but then I kept some and put them in like a folder that I had. So for example, I have a medical folder, so I put those away. And then I noticed my medical folder was really thick. So that's going to be like, okay. So even though I got rid of the surface, papers, now I have to go and go through all the folders where the papers went. And that, so it's like a multifaceted project that I wasn't thinking about. I just was thinking, oh, I'm just going to get rid of these papers on my desk, but it's not that simple. But having said that, I felt really good that I did it. And I think that I should try to do that without having a deadline and just do it once a week and start from there. And I think since I felt so good about it, I probably will continue to do it. It's just the starting of it that was hard.
Thank you, Sue. Well, that is a great illustration of the teaching from the Talmud that a mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. We start doing good, it feels good, so we do more. And that first step is the hardest. And I often say the first step is the whole game, because once you get going, usually it's like, oh, it wasn't as bad, feels good, I like it, etc. Joanne.
Yeah, so in the breakout group, I mentioned that I deleted a gazillion emails, and I did unsubscribe from at least some of them, but not enough. And so that was a big thing. But I got to unsubscribe to more. And I think I mentioned I throw out as much mail as I can, but I keep maybe one or two to send some donation, on Friday, and then I don't know. I mean, the housework, it's like the dishes in the sink. I tell myself I'm going to do 5 now, and then maybe I'll do 10. Or I'll say I'm going to do 10, and then I'll say, or I'll do 20, or I might as well do the whole thing because it's almost time. So yeah, that works for me.
Thank you, Joanne.
Oh, and one more thing that I mentioned, and also the importance of having light. If you're affected by seasonal affective disorder, and having my light box, I got to put that together again.
It's reminding me it's getting dark in here. I could turn on my little light. Let there be light. Harry.
I was mentioning to Mary Ann that I have a wonderful app that people might be interested. It's called To-Do List. It's one word, To-Do List. And it's a wonderful app that's really kept me in order because it allows me to list tasks and appointments. And anytime you have a task, you can actually set a date and time, and it floats right in. And then at the beginning of the week, I just look at the calendar and see what I got, which includes both appointments and tasks. So you can use your iPhone or your computers, and that's halfway there. Of course, you got to do it. That's the other half. But listing it, knowing what you have to tackle, and then what order you need to tackle it, having a great app or calendar is a must.
Thank you. To-do list. All
Yeah,
one
it's
word.
Yeah.
That's a great suggestion. Calendaring, scheduling really helps. Other thoughts? Yes, Marianne.
Well, I worked on keeping my house cleaner, like not just throwing things on the floor or just leaving dirty dishes. And that's good because it makes me feel better, and I feel like I can think better when things are orderly. And then I noticed that I have because I meditate every morning, I have a great deal of disorder in my thinking. Like my mind jumps like this all around. And that's not always so good. It's most of the time it's not good. So I've tried to have more order in my thinking by being, I guess, just more in the present.
Thank you, Marianne. You know, the one quote that I thought if we didn't have enough time I would share relates to this directly. So I'll just put it in the chat. This is from Heshbon HaNefesh, which was written in 1812-ish in Ukraine, 1818. All of your actions and possessions should be orderly, each and every one in a set place and time. Let your thoughts always be free to deal with that which is ahead of you. So I think that feels very relevant to what you're talking about. There is this connection between, you know, just if there's clutter around, it's distracting. And my wife and I have very different set points for this. She would get like physically stressed if there was too much stuff around, and I didn't have that up until a certain point during the kind of shut down for COVID, when there were 4 people here and no one ever left. And I was like, all right, I get it. I'm feeling it. Bye, Shelley. Thanks for coming by. Anyone else care to share tricks or practices? Yes, Sue, and then Janet.
I just wanted to say something else I mentioned I forgot to say, and it reminded me when you said that having a set place and a set time for everything. I'm having trouble with Facebook because it's like that there's no bell that goes off, but I pick up my phone and I scroll. And I was just saying that I should really come up with a set time to look at it and not do it all day long, because it's like this what's that Pavlovian thing where it pulls at you, you know?
Yeah.
Is that the right? I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
yeah, classical conditioning.
Yeah. And so I think that would be, maybe that's what I'm going to work on for next week. You know, just coming up maybe just once, and, you know, I don't have to do it all. I could do it once during the day. Right. So anyway, okay.
Thank you, Sue. Janet.
You know, there's the Dewey approach, which is learning by doing. Sometimes I have to learn by not doing. In order to get my mind to be free to figure out where I'm going to go in this book that I'm trying to write, sometimes I have to just get away from it. Take a walk, pull some weeds or whatever. That clutter, the mind gets cluttered also. And sometimes we have to unclutter the mind. It's not easy. Meditation does help, but there's no one path to uncluttering the mind for me anyway, other than You know, how do you not think?
Yes. Thank you, Janet. Bonnie.
So one of the things that I have learned over the years is that I give myself rewards. So I set a goal of what I want to do, and then it's a reward. It's not a food reward. It's a reward that says, yes, you can watch a half an hour of a show, or it's no different than I did with the kids when I taught, or my own kids, is that you plan and you do. And it seems to work, especially when you're organizing something. And you don't have to start with the whole room. You only have to start with a small corner. You do it, you finish, you get a reward, you take a break, you go back to it afterward. So that works for me.
Mhm.
Thank you. Karen, you will get the last word today.
Okay, I was just thinking about what role emotion plays in order. You know, some people are so sentimental about things that they have. If they don't quite have a place for it, it's really difficult to know what to do with it. And then when I look at other people, and I take this from life experience, who don't seem to be so attached to material objects, they're very good about being able to know exactly what to put where and what to get rid of to make room for other stuff. I am more of the emotional person as to where to put things and keep them and find them and order things. And so that makes it a little harder for me. I play more catch up than look ahead some days. Maybe someone else relates.
Thank you. That's and I guess I wasn't completely transparent. You get the second to last word. I'll get the last word, as I always do. But reminds me of a discussion at the synagogue where I was interning, and they needed to find something to do. They had a bunch of prayer books that were no longer used, and they were like, should they go in the Geniza, which is like, you know, a book burial, which they have one at the synagogue, or should they do something else? And the rabbi was really attached to them, because inside of each book there was a little plate from someone who had donated some money to help support the book, and he had talked to them and he knew them. And so you know, there's the, how do you deal with it? And so people were like, well, should we rip the pages out and make an art project? And so I had thought about maybe, you know, creating a little plaque or something with everyone's name on it, or a little other way to remember the books. I don't know what he decided to do, but some other way to kind of honor that memory, a very special memory, without having, you know, 100 books that the synagogue can no longer store. And so there's lots of ways to approach this, and it's you know, often the thing isn't really about the pair of shoes; it's about where I wore them and what I was doing when I wore them. So. Well, friends, another really wonderful discussion today. I thank all of you for leaning into this. And I have a lot of like worksheets from Hebrew that are on this desk, which I'm going to put back in the binder when we're done with this call. So that is my inspiration for today. So let's close our eyes and do a quick closing meditation. Once again, a deep breath through the nose and hold. And a nice leisurely exhale. Another inhale and a leisurely exhale. Let's take a moment of gratitude for our ability to see order in the world, for our ability to plan, or our ability to let things go, and just be unstructured. And that, for that ability, as someone said, to just move back and forth, doing things at the right time or when they feel right to us. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.